Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 3.5-year-old named Kylie, and I also have an 18-month-old named Mia. For those of you guys who follow along from week to week, you will recognize that I am officially back in my normal filming space. Woohoo! However, it is still not 100% exactly the way I want it. I'm guessing it's probably gonna sound very echoey because I just had new flooring installed in this room. So I need to do something about the audio quality so that it's not echoey, and then my lighting situation still needs some tweaking. So please bear with me for a little longer. I do work really hard to make sure that you guys have a decent video watching experience. So I just have a couple of things left to take care of, and hopefully everything will be back up to snuff. So a very long time ago, basically back when I first started this Montessori at Home series on this YouTube channel, I created a video called 5 Great Books for Parents, which is still a fantastic resource if you're looking for just a short little list of good books to check out if you are a parent that's new to Montessori. So I will go ahead and link that video down below if you have not seen it and you're interested in checking it out. But I've received a lot of requests lately for not only an update on my book list, but requests for my recommendations on some other resources. Things like books, podcasts, blogs, where to find Montessori materials, activity ideas, printables, as well as homeschool courses and curriculum. So from one busy parent to another, today I'm going to be sharing with you my latest and greatest list of my favorite Montessori resources that I would recommend to Montessori parents at home. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with books because I've read so many fantastic Montessori books that I want to recommend all of them to you guys, but I tried to pick out just a few really, really good ones in various different categories. So starting with babies, the book Montessori from the Start was one of the first books that I ever read. It provides a fantastic solid foundation for a parent who's totally new to Montessori, and I think it's a really good starting point if you really want to dig into the nitty-gritty and the how and the why and really get a good grasp and understanding of it before you dive in. When it comes to toddlers, I think it's pretty unquestioned at this point that the Montessori Toddler by Simone Davis is basically like the handbook for parents who are doing Montessori at home. It is filled with such an incredible amount of information and charts and diagrams and pictures and things to guide you along your journey that it's pretty much foolproof. And she just has a very conversational way of writing that it makes it so easy to read. It's inviting and warm, and it makes you feel like she's your friend kind of whispering in your ear. So I love that book and would recommend it to every parent. Even if you have a baby right now and you don't have a toddler, I would still recommend reading that book because your baby eventually is going to be a toddler, and I think that most families would find it incredibly useful. On that note, Simone Davis is also in the process of writing a book called The Montessori Baby, which is like her follow-up version geared toward infants. It's not going to be available until spring of next year. So actually it's not too far off. It's only a couple of months out, I guess. So if you are holding out for a good Montessori baby book, that is on the horizon this coming spring. And then the following year, she is writing a book called The Montessori Child, which is aimed, I think, at like the 6 to 12 age bracket. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it is for slightly older children, like beyond the preschool years. So, and again, that is the following year. So those are 2 books that are not out yet, but I know as soon as they come out, I'm going to be reading them because I just know based on her first book that they're going to be fabulous. So keep those on your radar if you will have a child in those age brackets in the next year or 2. When it comes to preschool, there's a book called Teaching Montessori in the Home, the Preschool Years, which I would highly recommend. It has a lot of very simple DIYs on a lot of the classic Montessori materials and activities that if you're homeschooling are great to know how to do. And even if you're not homeschooling, I think that any parent would find them useful as a little something extra to do with your preschooler at home. As far as books for all ages that are just kind of general learning about Montessori and learning how to do it at home with your child, there are 2 books that I love. The first is How to Raise an Amazing Child the Montessori Way by Tim Selden. And this is an incredibly visual guide. So if you are a visual learner, it's got lots of pictures. The little chapters are really short and easy to digest. You could easily kind of read from front to back, or you could pick and choose certain chapters based on what your needs are in that current moment. It's just a very versatile guide for parents. And then there's another one called Teach Me to Do It Myself, which is basically like an activities guide. There's a ton of activities broken up by the different subject areas, and they kind of go in a relative sequence for how they should be introduced to your child from babyhood all the way up through the preschool years and beyond. But it's a good little handy reference guide if you're looking for more activity ideas. And where better to learn about Montessori than from Dr. Montessori herself. She was a very prolific writer. She has so many books that are out there, many of which are very heavy reads that maybe a parent might not find so easy to read through in their spare time. But there are two in particular that I would recommend that you check out if you're really serious about learning more about the philosophy behind Montessori practices, and they would be relatively parent-friendly. And those two books are called The Secret of Childhood and The Absorbent Mind. Some of the things that she gets into in some of these books can be pretty heavy. So if you have a parent friend or two to read the book together and maybe bounce ideas off of with each other as you read, all the better. But of course, I do think that these are totally possible to read by yourself as long as you've got the dedication and the time to do so. And then there are books on discipline. And in the Montessori approach, we use positive discipline with children. So all of the books that I'm about to share fall under that umbrella. And the first one is actually called Positive Discipline. It's written by Jane Nelson. She has an entire series of books beyond just the classic version that she initially wrote that are geared toward certain age groups. So I actually own several of them. The first one is Positive Discipline, the first 3 years. And then the follow-up is Positive Discipline for preschoolers. And then there are several others for teenagers and other age groups, as well as classroom teachers. So she really wrote a little something for everyone. So if you're looking for something more specific, then you can definitely check one of those out. But I feel very confident in saying that she includes the same core of information that you need in basically every single one of the books. So if you just wanted to pick up one of them for your specific age child, you should be good to go. For parents of toddlers, the book No Bad Kids, Toddler Discipline Without Shame by Janet Lansbury is a very short, simple, easy to read, practical guide that has examples in it that you can put into action the next day. Just as a little side note, Janet Lansbury is amazing. She's not a Montessori educator. She's actually a student of Dr. Magda Gerber, who pioneered the RIE approach, which is Resources for Infant Educators. And she's currently one of like the foremost spokespeople for the RIE approach today. A lot of the philosophies and practices that you will find in RIE go hand in hand with the Montessori environment as well. So you'll see a lot of overlap, and her approach to discipline, it follows a more respectful, gentle parenting, positive discipline-esque approach. So like I said, you'll find a lot of overlap, and I really enjoy a lot of the advice that she has to offer parents. And my last book recommendation is Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn. Now, out of all of the books on this list, I would say that hands down, this is the one that really got to me. This is the one that changed my perspective, like truly on a really deep level, and not just from a Montessori approach, but also from a respectful parenting approach. The way that he presents the information in the book is just so common sense that it leaves you thinking like, why doesn't everybody think like this? Like, why isn't this more common knowledge? And I just wish that every parent on the face of this planet could read this book before they have children, because I think we would see the relationship between parents and children everywhere. It would look a lot different. The next category is podcasts, and I know that there are quite a few really good Montessori-focused podcasts out there, but truth be told, I don't have a ton of time myself to listen to podcasts as much as I love listening to them. So I just have a couple of tried and true favorites that I find myself always coming back to, and those are the ones that I'm going to share with you. The first is called The Montessori Notebook by Simone Davis, who's also the author of the Montessori Toddler book that I shared with you earlier. And Simone is just a wealth of information. She's been a Montessori teacher for I think well over 15 years now. She runs her own Montessori play group over in Amsterdam, and she's written several books, and she does all these amazing conferences, and she's just an amazing inspirational person that I love to learn from. And her podcast tends to focus on just more of the general overarching questions that come up for Montessori parents and teachers too. And she's been doing a lot of interviews lately as well with experts that are all related to the field of Montessori. And in addition to all of that, her voice is just very calming and reassuring and easy to listen to. So I really enjoy her podcast. Next up is Child of the Redwoods by Aubrey Hargis, who is a trained Montessori teacher as well as a Montessori homeschooling mom of 2 boys. And her podcast tends to focus on specific issues and questions that come up for Montessori parents with their children. Very common things, snafus that you might run into that are constantly on a parent's mind. And for that, I love listening to her podcast because I feel like there's always something that she posts that I'm like, oh, I have to deal with that too. I want to know. And so it's very fun to listen to what she has to say surrounding all of these different topics, just because she has so much experience, because her 2 children are a little bit older. I think she has a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, if I'm not mistaken. So she's got a lot of advice and wisdom to offer, and listening to each one of her podcast episodes is almost like having a conversation with her. Like Simone, she's very easy to listen to, and I think most parents would enjoy listening to her podcast series. Next up is Shelf Help, which is co-hosted by Nicole Kavanaugh, who has a Montessori blog that we'll talk about in just a little bit. And she's also a mom of 4. And then Amy Dorsch, who also has her own Montessori blog, and she is a mom of 2, and I think currently expecting another one on the way. And listening to their podcast is really fun because it's like they have a little good catch up between them, like they're on the phone, and then they dive into the nitty gritty on some really awesome Montessori topic that parents tend to find interesting. And so it's kind of like being on the phone with them, and for that reason it's very easy to listen to, and the time tends to go by really quickly as you're listening to each episode. So between the 2 of them, they have a lot of experience, and I think a lot of parents could benefit from what they have to share. The last podcast is called Unruffled by Janet Lansbury. Again, this one is entirely discipline, respectful parenting focused, and each episode centers on a question that a parent has sent into her, and that she kind of unpacks sentence by sentence and really dissects and gets into the why and the how and some practical suggestions for how to go forward. And she's been doing this podcast for several years now, and on her website she's got a whole archive of her previous ones that you can look through just by topic. So basically any discipline problem that you run into, I'm almost positive she has at least 1 episode on her podcast that she's done on that discipline issue. So it's a really good resource for parents who are looking for specific help with a certain problem that they're having with their child. The next category are blogs for more learning and inspiration about Montessori, especially if you are brand new to it. And the first one is called The Kavanaugh Report, which is written by Nicole Kavanaugh. She's the same person who hosts the Shelf Help podcast. I find her blog to be inspirational because she started out like so many of us. She was just a parent who stumbled into Montessori when her child was very young, fell in love with it, and never looked back. And now she is online sharing all of her experience and her wisdom, activity ideas, and just practical information for all parents who want to learn more about doing Montessori at home. Another great blog for learning more about Montessori philosophy and the authentic practice is the Montessori Notebook, again by Simone Davis. I know that some of her blog articles were some of the first that I ever came across when I first started learning about Montessori. And again, she is just such a wealth of information. So definitely check out her blog. Another great one is Child of the Redwoods, and this blog is especially inspirational if you are a Montessori homeschooling parent. She's just got a lot of really great information on there to help you get started with that, as well as just general Montessori information too. And again, Janet Lansbury's blog for more on the respectful parenting approach and dealing with discipline issues that might arise at home. She's got a whole archive of all of her previous podcasts and her previous blog posts that are completely searchable. So if you need help with something, hop on her blog and you're almost guaranteed to find something. All right, so the next category is where to find Montessori activity ideas and printables. And these are the websites, the blogs that I find myself going to over and over again because they just have such good resources available. Many of them that are free, but also some that you can pay for and that I honestly think they are a worthwhile investment. So I wanted to share them with you guys, especially with all of the new homeschoolers out out there, these are some of my top favorites. Each of the blogs offers something slightly different in the way of their topics and the style of the materials that they create, which helps to offer a little bit more variability between the various different activities. But I would also suggest maybe just using that search box and typing in the specific topic you're looking for, just to make your search a little bit shorter. And if you're finding that you really like the materials that are offered by a particular blog, I would suggest subscribing to their email newsletter, because that will often give you access to their subscriber freebie page, where you can find even more materials for free, which is always great as a parent. Okay, so the next category is where to actually purchase Montessori materials. And yes, there are many that you can actually DIY at home yourself, but sometimes it's just not feasible to DIY it. Either it's not cost effective, or you just don't have the materials that you would need, or maybe it's just too complicated and you don't want to deal with it, and that's totally fine too. So if you're finding yourself in the market for a specific Montessori material and you're not sure where to find it, I'm going to share with you a list of all of the websites and places that I usually go to look for my Montessori materials. Now, I would be lying if I said I didn't check Amazon first most of the time. And that's because I'm finding that now you can find more and more authentic Montessori materials on Amazon. You can't find everything, but you can find a lot of some of the more common materials, especially things that a lot of homeschoolers are using. You can find them on Amazon for a pretty reasonable price. And when I can find something like that, that's typically where I will purchase it. However, there are some things that you just cannot find on Amazon, or the only version of it you can find is like really poor quality and just not something that you want to invest your money in. And when that happens, I go elsewhere. So when I can't find something on Amazon, depending on what it is, usually the next place that I will check is Etsy, because they have a lot of really beautifully handcrafted products available for purchase from all over the world. And it's nice to know that I'm supporting a small business, and also that the product I'm receiving has been handcrafted with love. So I like to check Etsy, but sometimes you can't find what you're looking for on Etsy either. So when I find myself in that position, then I switch gears and I start looking at some of the Montessori product retailers that you can find online. The one that I've been using the longest, actually since my oldest was a baby, is called For Small Hands. And this one is specifically geared for parents setting up their home environment with their Montessori child, setting them up for success, and having some of those practical life materials on hand. Their sister company, which is called Montessori Services, has a lot of the same products on their website, but then you'll also find some extra materials on there for purchase that are more geared toward a Montessori teacher for their classroom or for a homeschool curriculum. Whenever I'm looking for a very specific, classic, authentic Montessori material, there are a couple of websites that I tend to look at first, and those ones are Montessori Outlet, Allison's Montessori, and Kid Advance. All of these websites tend to have pretty reasonable prices on the materials that they sell. When it comes to Montessori furniture for your home, there are two places that I personally like to look. The first one is Sprout, and they create beautiful eco-friendly wooden furniture right here in the USA. We own several of their pieces, and they are all very high quality, and I cannot recommend them enough. And then the other place I like to look is IKEA, because they have such a huge selection for basically every room of your home to help set your child up for independence. And of course, they are incredibly budget friendly. And then there are thrift stores, which I think a lot of people tend to forget about or overlook, but thrifting is a great way to procure very high quality items for a very inexpensive price tag. Things like furniture for your homes, you know, small chairs, stools, tables, things like that, all the way to the trays that you're gonna house your child's activities in, or small little bowls and cups and things for practical life. There's basically anything you can think of, you can find some area of a thrift store that carries something like it. And if you're in the right place at the right time, you might be lucky in what you find and get it for a really cheap price. The very last category is all about homeschool courses and curriculum, because I know many of you guys are new homeschoolers as well, just like I am. And so I wanted to share with you the resources that I have found that have helped me in getting started with that. And so the first two that I want to share are the two homeschool courses that I would recommend. The first course is by Angela Chang over at MontessoriLife.com. She offers a homeschool preschool course that is self-paced and is more than enough to get you up off the ground and off to the races and started with it with confidence. So I will leave a link to that in the description box down below in case you want to check it out. And the other homeschool course is called Homeschool of the Redwoods. It's offered by Aubrey Hargis of Child of the Redwoods. It is an 8-week intensive course that covers every single area of the Montessori preschool 3 to 6 curriculum in depth. There are hours of videos available to go along with each of the units, as well as live Q&A, group coaching, and support. Because the course is so interactive, she only offers it twice a year. So it's open for enrollment in the fall, which I believe is already closed, and then she also offers it again in the spring. So if you're interested in checking out Homeschool of the Redwoods, I will also put a link to that in the description box below too. If you are more of a do-it-yourselfer when it comes to piecing together your homeschool curriculum, there are a couple of websites that I would recommend you check out. The first one is infomontessori.com, which is a really great overview of all of the different activities and materials that are included in the 3 to 6 curriculum, along with a description of how to present each of those materials to the child. And then the other one is montessorialbum.com, which is very similar, although it's got more of a Wikipedia feel to it because anyone can go on and edit and make changes and add to it. But it is vetted by a group of people to make sure that the information is accurate. You can also purchase Montessori albums, which is not always recommended because the albums that people are making available for sale are usually ones that they created for themselves during their own Montessori teacher training program. And so it's not always intuitive to someone else, but they are available for purchase. And if you're just looking to find a set to help guide your curriculum, then there are many available online for purchase. So I will leave a link to a website down below that I know of that has a whole list of different options at varying price ranges. And finally, if you want somebody to just package it all up and hand it to you so that you can go without any further thought, there is an entire Montessori homeschool curriculum, activities, manuals, everything that you can purchase from the North American Montessori Center. It does come with a hefty price tag, I will say that, but it is pre-packaged for you. Like, you literally don't have to do much of anything as in the way of planning. So I will put a link to that in case you are interested in looking at that. Okay, I know that was a huge list of resources that I compiled for you guys. So I went ahead and put everything in the description box down below. There's links to all the stuff that I mentioned in case you're interested in learning more about something in particular. So I hope that helps you out and makes you feel a little bit less overwhelmed with the sheer volume of information that you just watched. If you have any of your own favorite resources that I did not mention in this video that you think other parents could really benefit from, then please leave them in the comments down below and share them with us. And just in case you are new to Montessori and you want to learn more about how to implement Montessori practices at home with your children, I also offer a comprehensive e-course that walks you through it step by step. So I will leave a link to that as well, just in case you're interested in learning more about it. And if you are new to my channel, I also wanted to let you know that this video is part of a much larger series on this YouTube channel called Montessori at Home, which is aimed at providing practical tips and advice for busy parents like you and I for implementing Montessori practices at home with your children. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in watching more of, then you might consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video, because I do upload a new one just like this one every single week. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.